Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jim. Today, I want to talk about a play I recently finished. I read it in one sitting. It's a short play, and it is Salome by Oscar Wilde. I'm not going to do a deep review of this. What I want to talk about is more of a show and tell type of episode. I'm going to look at two editions of this play. One is the Heritage Press Books edition, and the other is a reproduction of the illustrated by Aubrey Beardsley edition. This is the art, like the decadent age in English literature, like late 19th century, going into the 20th century. And these are very interesting books. The illustrations are fun. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to get rid of them, one of them or the other. So first I said, well, let's read the play, which I did. And then I decided, I think in the end, I'm not going to get rid of either of them for the time being because they both have their merits. So let's talk about that next on Great Books, Big Ideas. Okay, if you're familiar with Heritage Press books, these were actually pretty affordable, fine edition hardcovers that were popular in the 20th century, like mid to late 20th century. The Heritage Club it was like a club that you subscribed to, and they would send you books, I think, every month, or I'm not sure how frequently. But anyway, they often included these inserts called sandglass, which gives you information about the author of the book and the illustrator. These are illustrated editions. That's part of the pleasure of them is, they just look good on the shelf. They feel good in the hands. They're easy to read because the type is big. And this particular edition is kind of special because it's just all the color it uses and so forth. You'll see in a second. I'll put it up on the document cam. So anyway, I'm going to read you a little bit from this sandglass to give you some background, first of all, about the play Salome by Oscar Wilde. It was a notorious play. It's one that got him into some trouble. When Oscar Wilde wrote Salome, he was at the height of his powers. The year was 1891, a year in which he published 4 books: The Picture of Dorian Gray, Intentions, Lord Arthur Saville's Crime, and A House of Pomegranates. Wilde had already captivated society with Lady Windermere's Fan. That's a play. He was a public figure, a literary dandy who had revived some of the splendor of the Regency, a wit whose sayings were current in Mayfair as well as in Chelsea, a playwright of more than usual promise. Yet Salome, one of his greatest works, missed fire. Instead of being received as a serious work of art, it met with contempt, anger, and abuse. Wilde had written it in French. He later said, "My idea of writing the play in French was simply this. I have one instrument that I know I can command, and that is the English language. There was another instrument to which I had listened all my life, and I wanted once to touch this new instrument to see whether I could make any beautiful thing out of it." It is generally believed that Wilde wrote Salome especially for Sarah Bernhardt. She put it in rehearsal at the Palace Theatre in London in 1892, but the Lord Chamberlain banned the play under a law still in force in England, which forbids the dramatization of scriptural subjects on the English stage. This is a play about John the Baptist getting beheaded and Salome doing the dance and King Herod and all that. The first performance of the play was given in Paris in 1896 at a time when Oscar Wilde was in Reading jail, so that Paris was giving his play hospitality at a time when London was trying to apologize for Mr. Wilde's aberrations. It was Lord Alfred Douglas who translated Oscar Wilde's play into Oscar Wilde's native language, but Aubrey Beardsley translated it first. Now, Aubrey Beardsley is the guy who did these kinds of illustrations. So let's listen a little bit about him. It is sometimes said that Salome suffered for the sins of Aubrey Beardsley, for in the 90s, it was Beardsley, not Wilde, who was regarded as the typical exponent of decadent art. And that's what this play is known for, as a primo example of decadence. When he died in 1898, he was only 26 years old. He was an artist of very precocious development. His brilliant drawings, mainly done as illustrations for books, belong to the most characteristic examples of the highly artificial artistic tendencies of the 90s. But his drawings had an enormous influence. He made a series of drawings for Salome. I'm going to show those to you in a second. Daring and morbid and sensual in character, full of a fine decorative sense and of an originality bordering always on the fantastic. Beardsley delighted to shock the middle classes, not for the good of their souls, but because he disliked their tastes and habits. A play like Salome attracted him immediately. So he made the illustrations, and he also translated it from the French. The translation was not to Wilde's liking, and Wilde refused to permit its use. So John Lane published at the Bodley Head in 1893 an edition of Oscar Wilde's Salome translated from the French into English by Lord Alfred Douglas, who was Wilde's notorious boyfriend, and decorated with illustrations by Aubrey Beardsley. 4 of the illustrations Lane refused to use. Why, it is difficult for us to say. The Beardsley drawings are fantastic, all of them sensual, all of them. Why any of them should seem to John Lane's Welsh conscience less desirable than others remains a mystery. A large part of that mystery, however, is explained by an Englishman named Holbrook Jackson, who wrote for an edition of Salome published by the Limited Editions Club, which was the companion club of heritage books. Like, the limited editions were truly limited editions, like they were more pricey. A wonderfully illuminating essay upon the play. That essay is reprinted in this heritage edition, the one I'm about to show you. So you see that you are being subjected to 2 kinds of illumination within the covers of one book. I'll tell you a little bit about the illustrator of the Heritage Press book in a minute, because they did not use the Beardsley illustrations, they used someone else. All right, let's turn to the Aubrey Beardsley first, and I'll walk you through these illustrations, and you'll sort of, I think you can easily imagine what the scandal might have been about with Beardsley, and you'll have to read the play Salome on your own to figure out why it was scandalous for a readership in England. Well, they did have that law on the books, like that you couldn't dramatize scriptural subjects. So Oscar Wilde, probably that's why he wrote it in French, because he maybe knew he couldn't get away with it otherwise. But anyway, let's look at the Oscar Wilde illustrations, or the Aubrey Beardsley illustrations for the Oscar Wilde play. This is a Dover Books edition. It's paperback. We got it used. It's clearly a bit beat up, but it's still, I think, a nice edition. So here you can see, this is Beardsley's style. It's like drawing in this ink style. Dedication. Here's the publisher's note. Just to read this briefly. This present edition reproduces in its entirety the first English edition of Salome, published in 1894 by Elkin Matthews and John Lane. And then they note like the extra material in here in this edition. They have an essay written by Robert Ross for the 1930 edition. Illustration design from the studio. I think that's this one. And some other stuff. They give you a list of the pictures here. So you've got like 20 Beardsley pictures. Well, let's step through these. Won't take long. Hopefully you enjoy Beardsley's style. Classic decadent art style of the 1890s. I guess you could say Beardsley's quintessential decadent. As I said before, the play is a one-sitting reading. It's short. It's got a lot of purple passages that are very luxurious and reveling in sensory details. And it's a gory, gruesome subject too, because the John the Baptist character loses his head, quite literally, served up on the platter for Salome. You can find this story in the Bible. Of course, Wilde puts his own stamp on it. Not sure why he wrote Salome. I don't know the textual history at all, why he took interest in it. Wilde, like Aubrey Beardsley, didn't mind ruffling feathers. I mean, part of the decadent period was to challenge the kind of conventional, normie, bourgeois, middle class values of the day. Take note of the books that are on this shelf. Like we have Marquis de Sade and Maron Lescaut and The Golden Ass and Zola's Nana, and one more I can't read. There's the head. And that's what that looks like. That's the Salome. That's the original Aubrey Beardsley illustration. So I feel like this edition, even though it's not a great condition in paperback, the illustrations look fine, and it just has historical art history value for me. So for the time being, I think I'll keep it. Like, I do like those illustrations. They're very memorable. That leads us to our Heritage Press edition. The illustrator of this edition is Valenti Angelo, born in Tuscany in 1897. And they give you in this sandglass a whole history of his life, little bio, which I'll skip. Has a lot of illustration credits, but some of the details of these illustrations I found interesting. He also had illuminated the Song of Songs for Heritage Press, which was pretty successful, and they reprinted it. And here's what, like, part of his artistic method. So Angelo, he says he imports tablets of liquid gold from France. He dips a thin pointed brush into the gold and then brushes the decoration upon the printed pages deftly and delightingly. Then he burnishes the precious metal, polishing it with a well-worn soup bone. He likes to do it. That is why when the Song of Songs proved so great a success, Valenti Angelo came to us with a suggestion that he make an edition of Salome. And he illustrated this with miniatures, which would be illuminated with gold. And I hope these will show up on camera, because they're pretty cool. And so it says here that each illustration was illuminated by hand with pure gold. Interesting. Okay, here, let's turn to the document cam. Here is our front cover. I don't know if you can see that design etched in there. But immediately you're greeted by this sort of orange-yellow color theme. And the pages here, they're kind of like this. I don't know what you call that with book design, but they're sort of folded. But they're at the top edge, but then they're open here. But basically, you just look at it that way. So here is our same translation from the French by Lord Alfred Douglas, introduction by Holbrook Jackson, decorated and hand illuminated by Valenti Angelo for the Heritage Press, copyright 1945. So I don't know if you can see that, but here, like, all this gold was hand touched by Valenti Angelo. Pretty cool. The typography and the design was a lot of fun to read and behold. Even that little dot, that's in gold. Here's our introduction, good introductory essay. Not, I would say most Heritage Press titles, almost everyone I can think of doesn't have stuff like this. You just have like a white margin, but this one's kind of special. I wonder what it cost back in the day. They tried to make these pretty affordable for middle class consumers. And then here's where the play starts. I'll just walk you through the illustrations. The illustrations in this edition, I think, are trying to be more faithful to what's actually in the play, whereas Aubrey Beardsley just did his own thing in a kind of wild and crazy way. You see that gold in there? I'm not sure if it's going to show up on the camera, but all these are dabbed in gold leaf. I really like how the text is blocked on the page and you have this colored border. It was a fun book to read. And there's the poor guy. Yochanan is his name, but this would be John the Baptist. And that's it. Short book. So we got 2 editions. Should I keep them both? Should I get rid of one or the other? I don't think I'm going to get rid of either of them. I put them actually together on the shelf now. And even though I would say Salome isn't particularly a great play, it's like got some historical interest. It's a good play. It's like scandalous. I don't even know what to say about it. I'm not even going to try to review it. It is what it is, but it caused a stir, so it's notable for that reason. That's sometimes a reason to keep it on the shelf. And both these editions have their merits. I really like the Valenti Angelo Heritage Press illustrations with the kind of gold touches, and it's like, that's kind of like almost like a cartoony type of style. I kind of like that. And then the Aubrey Beardsley is also of historical value. So this is actually in that early edition of the play. This is these are the illustrations you would have seen. So I like that as a reproduction as well. So I think I'm just going to keep them until I get tired of them. I don't see a reason to get rid of either one. What would you do? I wonder. You want to give me advice, please do. But yeah, that's just a little show and tell video. I sometimes like to show you illustrated editions because they're fun. And let me know if you have thoughts about the play itself or the illustrations. But if you like the play, if you think it's a how does this serve as an example of like the decadent movement in late 19th century European culture, I'm all ears. I'm welcome. I welcome your comments and like to hear more about it, what your thoughts are. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, do all that crazy stuff. Thumbs up, ring bells, dance around the room, read a book, have fun with it. Take care. Enjoy. Peace out. Bye-bye.